Welcome back to the Midheaven Podcast. My name is Candice Marie, and this is my co-host,
the Pace Dealer.
Yeah. We are back here to analyze the stars for you.
And I'm just glad to be back. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, right? This is feeling pretty good. We're getting with it. We're keeping it going.
Got my beer?
Yeah. These are our weekly drinks.
Yeah. Let's get it.
You want to tell everybody what we're going to talk about today?
We're going to be talking about more of our perspectives of astrology. We use different chart systems when we read, and we have similar and also differing ways to look at the philosophy of astrology and, just different mechanics. So we're going to go more into stories and ideologies of how we perceive what we do and how we got more into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is cool. Like, we've had some really great feedback. We did a video for you guys that was about tarot. We did another video that was about synastry. And now we thought we would come and go a little bit deeper and talk to you guys about our philosophy of astrology, how we view astrology, how astrology is useful, how it applies to our day-to-day lives, why do we use it, how does it apply on a soul level and on a practical level, and get a little bit more into our own personal practice and talk about housing systems and how we go about utilizing astrology to be able to not only understand the path, but also to better make predictions and guide our clients.
True that. And that's what I appreciate about what we do too, because we help clear out a lot of misconceptions about astrology. A lot of astrology is very much a language. So when I say I'm a Gemini and she says she's a Scorpio, sometimes that can mislead people from the outside looking in to think we take that literal, as we don't see ourselves as zodiac signs, but it's just easier to say I'm a Gemini than my sun sign is in the sign of Gemini and I represent this. So, it's kind of cool to not only clear that up, but really address a lot of the beliefs that can really keep people stuck. For example, believing that, I hear this countlessly, and I love hearing it from beginner astrologers because it's something we all go through. But the whole notion that, this aspect is bad, and is this a good aspect, where you learn that there's no such thing as good or bad in aspects. Like every aspect, every sign. That's one thing I broke through too, thinking that, okay, which sign is the most cheaters? And then it's like, it's not just one zodiac sign that's the worst or best. Like you have that in every zodiac sign, and it's like, okay, this is how every zodiac sign cheats or stays faithful, and you get to
I think that's
flavors.
Part of the issue with armchair astrology. When you think about, when you really break it down and you think about how people view astrology, just everyday people, not most of the people that are watching this podcast, but people whose version of astrology is like, you read this little astrological blurb or this horoscope maybe that you'll see it in the back of a newspaper or maybe in the back of a magazine or in Cosmo, right? Which can seem very ambiguous and kind of it can kind of loosely apply to anything. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think that we've lost sight of the art of astrology and what it really truly means to practice, but also to really dive deep into the natal chart.
Mm-hmm. And speaking on that, I made a video debunking Bill Nye because he was talking about, it's not worth it to pay for an astrologer, and he put this on Now This. So I took that clip, I went point for point for everything he said, and YouTube actually secretly deleted the video, so I had to upload it again. But then another YouTuber took that video I made and debunked that video, talking about astrologer is mad that astrology astrologer is mad and says astrology is a science, which it isn't. So I debunked his video reacting to me, and he says something that was key. He's like, I have never had an astrology reading. I've only had a newspaper horoscope. And that was where it's like, you don't even realize you killed yourself in your own argument. And it was just like, damn. But, it's just that lack of awareness, which
people call it a pseudoscience.
Which I can't blame them because... To
each their own, obviously, if that's all that you know. Because, being an astrologer, I've read horoscopes for decades. And I write horoscopes. And not a lot of people know, number one, sun sign astrology is great, but that's one teeny tiny piece of the puzzle. And many times, you may be a Gemini, or you may be a Scorpio or a Sag or a Pisces, but it's the aspects to your sun and to your rising and all of those unique details that really kind of colors and illustrates what your unique birth chart is. And that's really what you get through speaking with an astrologer and having that understanding.
And it's just people from the outside looking in see so many armchair astrologers and so much bullshit and real pseudoscience. I remember Neil Tyson deGrasse spoke on astrology, which is misleading because you see, astrophysicists and astronomers talk about astrology, and you forget that they're not astrologers. So there's only so much they know. But he did talk about the bias that's relevant in astrology. So you hear a lot of bias and Barnum statements, and you start to think that that's all of astrology. You don't know to realize that there's a legitimacy in the craft. And yeah.
Well, astrology is, so you've got the wheel, right? It's 360 degrees. It makes up the astrological natal chart, and we can certainly track how planets move, and we can see those degrees and how it activates things, and we call this transits. Mm-hmm. And so I go back and forth because I've had this conversation with a number of people who have been like, well, yeah, but the stars have shifted. And yeah, things have,
equinox, right?
And which is true, that has happened. And we also have had people go back and forth on the 13th sign.
That was Bill Nye's argument. He was saying that it's not legit. First of all, he said it wasn't legit because of the precession of the equinox. Then he's talking about what sign is after Capricorn or before Capricorn. So you don't even know about the signs, but you know enough about it to say it's fake. It was just very weird. And I had to be like, bro, it's not based off the zodiac sign. It's not based off the constellations.
No, it's based off of the signs and the archetypes and the planets. And even though everything shifts, and I understand that, it's like people will ask me all the time, well, the planets have shifted. Like, how does this work? And I'll be like, I don't know. How did I predict that
exactly
Pluto was going to transit your moon, and your house was going to be under a complete demolish and a reconstruction? And obviously, how would we predict that without the knowledge that we have? And I think that that's where astrology starts to break off, and it becomes more figurative, and it becomes more spiritual, and it becomes more it's more interpretive, and it's definitely more psychological.
That's the art side of it. And that's what I want to preserve, because a lot of people won't admit there's an amazing article. If you type in why it is unacceptable to accept astrology as rubbish, and he goes in about how it's very much so a science, and we need to preserve the science aspect of it. There's the interpretive art, and then there's the scientific calculation, because a lot of people who move to debunk it will say, oh, the planets don't affect you. And astrology isn't accurate because the planets have a magical effect. It's merely just the science of astrology is the relationship between the sun's ecliptic path, the Earth's celestial equator, and the angles with which the sun interacts with planets. So when the moon is opposite the sun, that's a 180 degrees. It's literally geometry and math.
Yeah.
And that's why it's accurate. Science have proven that seasons affect temperament, and the seasons are broken into zodiac sign spaces. So that already gives credence to why.
What about the lunar cycles and how it affects, the ocean, and how it affects what's going on with the tide and everything? I mean, it's... And I guess that's why I love astrology, because we can argue about math and science and degrees and all that shit till the cows come home. But the reality is that from my perspective, astrology is the language of the soul.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the very overall archetypal karmic agreement, because we're made of space dust, right? Like, we know that we die, we return to the earth, and then the earth regenerates, and then we come back. And at one point, the earth was formed from some kind of big bang or, combustion or something that happened in space, which sent all of these particles out into space, and then it formed into planets, and then there was the ocean, and then there was the elements, and then there was life.
Right.
So we are stardust, and in a way, if this is this constant cycle of the reincarnation and going back to source, then where the stars and the planets align at the time of your birth and the first breath that you take, that is your cosmic roadmap. That is, and it's our job to interpret that.
It's our job to keep it pushing. Like in the 60s, like a while ago, there was the Mars effect experiment where a group of scientists were able to pull on charts, and they were able to study Mars and correlate high Mars degrees to successful athletes and people who are active. And then a group of scientists wanted to debunk that. I think a group of French scientists, and they replicated it and ended up proving it right and didn't know what to do with the data. And so they never published it. And these are how, like, you know, a lot of scientists who have something against astrology don't know what to look for and are already biased against it. So that's what made me realize there's actually a greater case to prove it as a science. And my proving of age was when my good Virgo friend, when I lived in El Paso, he worked for Homeland Security, and I talked to him about astrology, and he's like, "Man, that's for my girl. That's for the girls. Like, I don't believe in that stuff." And I basically, all he told me was his birthday. Like, his son was in Virgo, and I was telling him about the transits for Virgo, and he looked at me. He's like, "I mean, I'm not really like super into astrology still, but for someone who doesn't know what I'm going through, that's crazy that you were able to like figure out verbatim what is going on in my life." And it's not like he was obsessed with astrology, but it made him kind of look twice at just dismissing it. And I'm like, if I can make a Virgo a believer, like, holy shit.
I did that recently for somebody who was like, I notoriously only like choose Virgos to be like my health practitioners, or to do like my hair, or to do like my nails. Like, those are my people, right? Because they're really good at what they do. But it's my favorite being able to talk to somebody and having that connection, and being an unbiased third party, and being able to sit with a stranger or sit with somebody that you just met and just start talking about why whatever is happening in their life. And I catch myself doing it all the time, like outside of sessions.
And that's what we need, though. Like, we're the pioneers is going to push forward and like spread that awareness. Like, I'll open my platform live. I'll go on anybody's live channel, read your chart if you're a skeptic. And then if you want to lie after and be like, it wasn't, I know I gave you the best reading ever. And so you can lie live on TV and, you know, I gave you that reading. Like, it's we out here now. We not hiding. We turning skeptics into believers. And this period like this is like the Enlightenment age, where people were coming out the dark age of religion, and you had all this advent of scientists bringing that, you know what I'm saying? This is kind of like another age like that, where you're bringing people out the dark age of like religious science that's more theoretical, and there's facts, but a lot of these facts are half truths. They don't bring the spiritual, metaphysical, causal side to things, which astrology really maps out transpersonally through the outer planets, like perfectly.
You need that, right? You need that in order to ground the practice and the philosophy, and being able to relay that, like in a way, like, you know, it's like very much like the story of myth, like the, you know, the archetype of the hero and everything that he goes through, and being able to, and it relates to the tarot too, to go through all of these obstacles and all of these challenges in order to experience the soul's growth. And so what's so beautiful about astrology is that, and I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because I feel like my practice is changing, and it's shifting away from like future tripping or future predicting or whatever, which I can do. Like, if you want me to tell you what's going to happen on any given day, I can do that. But I feel like where astrology is really most helpful is to really look at your natal chart as that roadmap. And it's our job to look at the transits and how that's more or less like the astrological weather, to really show the path in which you're walking through, and like what to expect through those transits. So you're prepared, and you're accepting and acknowledging and aware of the purpose of why life is happening to you, and to co-create with the universe, rather than being in a state of existence where you are unaware and getting hit left and right with things. And maybe acceptance is so much easier when you have a reading. It's like, I think readings really give the power back to my clients, because they realize like, hey, here's the deal. I'm very matter of fact. I'm like, you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And this is the vessel that you're in, and this is what you agreed to, and you may not remember, but this is how it's going to go. So this is how you best navigate it. And this is all of the fruit that comes from the experiences that you're having, because life is hard and life is meant to test you. And maybe astrology makes sense of all of that in some way.
And it's the symbolism that can help and block us too, because a lot of the symbolism, I saw Grade A Under A made a funny ass video recently about constellations, and like, how did you guys look at these stars and come up with like a crab? This looks nothing like a crab. And he was kind of making fun of that. And a lot of the symbolism we have about astrology and what it means is, as accurate as it is also outdated, because that was based in a time before we had technology, before we had like the advancements we do. So people like us are updating the lingo. We're contributing our own experience, and everything we're doing here is super revolutionary. Especially with this podcast, especially with you as a watcher, because you're taking this information, you're sharing it, you're adding to the conversation, and considering, like, I'm very adamant about clapping back, especially as much as people may look down on people who are too into astrology. It's still a fact that a lot of people don't look too into it. And factually speaking, like, if you didn't know how to count, if you didn't know how to read, people will call you illiterate. If you don't know your moon sign, boo-boo, that's way worse. That's way worse. And I'm going to judge you, and I'm going to look down, and you don't know your moon. Like, if you're ignorant and you don't know about charts, that's cool. But if you know about it and you just playing it off, you don't know your moon sign, can I even respect you? Like, you don't even know who you are deep inside. And that's the consciousness that, you don't have to be condescending, but if people would keep that same energy and encourage you to read a book and learn how to read a numeric number system, well, astrology is the language of the stars, just like math is the language of science. So you have to know this stuff. And the pop culture is kind of dumbing it down to make it look like you're crazy if you're too into it. But, shout out to those of you who are keeping tradition, carrying on tradition, and moving this through, because this is the best thing you could ever give your kids, really.
It's so great for self-awareness. Like, I think about, like, some of my, like, astrology parents, and, like, some of the first encounters that I had with astrologers, and, like, this inner need to, like, figure out, like, why the fuck I am the way that I am. Because and it sounds like super egotistical, but I was just kind of like thinking, I remember, 12 to like 20 being like, I'm different. Like, I'm very different. Like, I'm very intense, and like, I've gone through a lot of shit in my life. And there's this constant theme of like the rebirth and like things changing, and like really overcoming like a lot of shadow stuff, and dealing with a lot of really heavy things. And I remember sitting and having like my first astrological reading, and like having that person explain to me, like, look, here's the deal. You've got your sun and 3 other planets conjunct Pluto. And this is a very heavy incarnation for you. And you're here to overcome XYZ. And you go through a lot of stuff before you turn 30, so you can segue and then start healing and helping other people. And that all of that really intense kind of Mars energy in my chart, which I was definitely misusing and kind of pushing in the wrong direction.
We all misuse Mars, I believe. Especially the first 30 years.
It made me like feel like, okay, like now there is a piece of me that feels complete and whole and like good, knowing that I am the intense little being that I am, and that my soul was like, oh, I want to go balls to the wall in this lifetime. I want to experience all of it, because I need to experience all of it, because it's this need to evolve. And that really changed my life. It really changed my perspective. It removed a lot of bitterness. It helped me deal with my ego. It really allowed me to realize that there's much going on beyond my immediate perception, not just in the sense of this lifetime and like the different dimensions, but karmically and in other lives, and how what I do now matters, not just in a sense of how I help other people, but the choices I make matter on an evolutionary level, and it will affect my future lifetime.
Amen. And like, astrology has given me so much more respect for the universe. And in like the 8-10 plus years that I've been doing this, and we've been doing this, I will still admit that as much as I've helped people, change people's lives, shown them the light, helped them really, come through, I know still like this much about astrology. And now I feel like, because I really want to get into case studies in my 30s and like get natal charts of like hundreds of thousands of people and do experiments, and then pass that on to the new generation, and then let them continue the research. it's like this has really unlocked a passion that I didn't even know I could have. Like human design, I'm eyeing you too. I don't know if you see those memes, like you're walking with astrology, I'm looking at human design, I'm like, oh shit, you looking sexy. But astrology is definitely my first love as far as like modalities. And I mean, I don't think I'll ever know everything there is to know about astrology, and I love that because there's just so much
constantly in a state of learning, right? I mean, it's
Right.
just, I mean, I believe regardless of what you are doing, what field you're in, if you're not constantly pushing to learn more, be at the top of your game, be continually growing in your field, and really innovating the newest techniques, technology, information, lessons, then you're gonna fall off. You got to be on top, right? So it's, you know, astrology you can learn forever. I mean, the best seasoned astrologers that I've spoken to are people who are 55 plus.
Right. That's
Right?
facts. That's facts.
And these are
They're
people
good,
because
good.
they've been
Yeah.
through the transits. They've dealt with the transits. A good seasoned astrologer. I'm not saying you can't be a young, good astrologer, especially we're super young to be practicing astrology, being in our early
Right.
30s. But a good seasoned astrologer is somebody who doesn't just understand the transits. It's somebody who's been through those transits.
Experienced
Right.
it.
And it's the experiencing going, here's how it's going to go. Here's how you move through it. And here are the tools to be able to reap all of the rewards of this transit. And so that's like, I mean, that's gold.
And we're the first generation to have astrology even go mainstream in our generation. So experienced astrologers are gold mines. But
Many of those are the people who learned during the Pluto, Uranus stuff in Virgo.
in Virgo, yes, that is
and,
insane to me.
And they were kind
Neptune,
of functioning
Scorpio.
under the radar, and they were
Exactly.
learning a lot. And you know,
If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be where we are right now at all. So I'm just very grateful. And they didn't have social media. They didn't really have. They probably had to like handcraft charts.
and they
didn't have birth chart
were
calculators.
experiencing that in the Pluto and Virgo. So I just want to be specific. These people may have had, you know, Pluto in Cancer, Pluto in Leo, but it was really when that Pluto Uranus conjunction started
right.
activating that they learned a lot. Like all of my spiritual teachers, all of my astrology parents are all, you know, 55 to 75.
My astrology, my astropsychology diploma course is being taught by someone in that
I have his
generation.
book, by the way.
Glenn Perry?
Yeah, I have his
He's a
book.
Scorpio.
I have his book, and I've had a reading with him.
He's so awesome. I've never had a reading with him, but that dude is legit.
Had a reading
like
with
I
him.
love that course. It's so dope.
Yeah, it's super
was the
helpful.
reading?
It was very insightful. His reading that I had with him really shifted my perspective once again away from being more future predicting and more, he really drilled home with me being like, look, you have Sun, Pluto, Mercury conjunct. Like you can really get to the core psychologically of people. And you get how people work. And he's like, don't be so focused on the forecasting or the future predicting or even the psychic stuff, even though you have it. It was more him being like, you have such a source of power. Use that to help people unlock and become more self-aware.
Right.
And so
that's my experience with you too, like being more aware of my abilities and like what I can do and like how to specify it. But one thing about him too that I appreciate is the very first book that we have to read when you start is a rule book of arguments. So you can learn what's a fallacy and like how to construct logical arguments, which is just the best because it's just helping me start to realize how I can make biased fallacies and statements. And it really does, you know, bring the process of psychology grounded perfectly.
well, that's so important because you got to come from a perspective, whether you're practicing from a psychological perspective or, you know, evolutionary or just Western, whatever.
Right.
I guess what's really challenging, and it's like you can practice astrology and you can learn it, and you can work through it, you can analyze a chart, but having that kind of like, I call it like bedside manner and like knowing how to be neutral and like how to be able to be in a position of not being influenced by your own opinions and being, what's the word that I'm looking for? What am I looking for? It's like being able to just, I don't know, just be completely detached from the outcome is not an easy thing to do. I mean,
Right.
it's like we have to deliver news on a daily basis, and it's not always the easiest news to deliver. And certainly the method of how we deliver these forecasts, especially when we're talking about heavy transits like maybe Pluto or Saturn, can sometimes seem very grim, right? And so we don't want to spin it. We don't want to paint it in a different color or picture than what it really is. So it's challenging enough.
Because what's grim to one could be cool for other twos.
Exactly. But I mean, it's challenging enough dealing with that than to have to relay that in a way that's to keep your client open-minded and optimistic and also aware and fully given all of the tools that they need to move through that. That's a heavy cross to bear.
And to move astrology away from the association with fortune telling, because that's another thing that is a pet peeve. Like, astrology can be used with divination and fortune telling, but realistically, you wouldn't call a meteorologist psychic if he said it was going to rain and it rained. So like when astrological predictions come true, it's scientifically calculated. It's not like, because some people are psychic astrologers and they channel energy. I channel planets all the time, but that's where we step into the art of interpretation. There's still a science of it. There's still a language of it. And, you know, it's very revealing just to see.
Not a lot of people are. I mean, you have astrologers that, and that's what's so awesome about astrology is that the field is so vast, right? Like you can have people who just want to do natal charts.
Exactly. Or just synastry.
And that's it. Or they just want to do synastry. They just want to do composites. But then when you branch into when people want to talk about transits or when people want to talk about solar returns or they want to talk about astrocartography, it's such a vast, it's almost like medicine. It's like you can branch into every field, into whatever it is you want to specialize in.
Financial astrology, relationship, medical astrology.
It definitely gets more and more and more complex when you start throwing in those aspects of transits and then adding into that, working with the general public and giving forecasts and giving predictions.
Speaking to a general audience. So then you have to also take into account that everyone's going to perceive it differently versus specific. And the thing is, people need to be more understanding with this field, because I cannot like Dr. Love was the huge news story years ago because he opened his own clinic, but he didn't have a license. You can't be a lawyer without a degree or a license. Yeah. Anyone can become an armchair astrologer. So if there's more frauds in this field, it's not regulated. It's not accredited.
And there's going to be a lot of bullshitters in anything that's potentially lucrative and popular. And certainly there is a fair share of that in this practice. But at the same time, it's like there's a lot of really great practitioners out there. There's a lot of really great astrologers out there. And most of them aren't even really making waves out in the internet world, or a lot of people who are practicing and been practicing for some time. They may not even be somebody who's like out in the mainstream and like writing for Cosmo. Like Respect. They may be the person who's living in the small town in middle America, and all they want to do is just research and focus on like Venus retrograde cycles, right?
Which is the future. Like eventually our kids and kids, that'll just be in the culture, and they can push it so much more, because I feel like it's the Pluto Aqua generation that's going to extremely, integrate this in a way where
it's therapeutic.
It's mainstream, it's therapeutic. Yeah. It's actually now pushing society forward. And, concerning once again that that lack of accreditation, the best way to know who's a legit astrologer is to do your research. Who has that 10,000 hours? Because it's not about who's an astrologer, who's a practicing astrologer.
And that's hard to find though, really? Because anybody these days, and I see both sides of it, because certainly, at least for me, like a lot of my practice was just kind of like out there, and it was just like rough and tumble, and I just like made it happen. But I had been practicing for a while, and in this community, it's like a lot of who you are is who you practiced with or who you studied with. And I feel like I see the plus side of being able to be really good at what you do and just like entering into internet land and being like, hi, this is what I practice, this is my beliefs. New and then frontier. Boom, you have a business. So it's the Wild West. But on the flip side, because it is so popular and it has become very mainstream, I think that you've also got a lot of people who are like, oh, I can do this, that, and the other. And then next thing you know, they've got hundreds of thousands of followers and they're giving armchair astrology advice. and in a position of influencing people's lives when they don't have the background.
And it's incredible, and it's insane, especially a lot of the people blowing up like on TikTok and like
you can be really
Instagram.
Great at media and really great at marketing yourself and shit when it comes to astrology, but have a lot of followers and
push on that narrative and like, you know, people, which is a part of the process, right? But it just kind of makes it more difficult to maneuver and deal growing as an industry with all.
But if you're really good at what you do, you will be the last man standing.
Facts.
So for me, it's a lot of like, I don't waste my time. I have blinders on. Like, I don't give a fuck what
people
anybody else is doing. I don't care what anybody else is doing. And I had to kind of set that kind of standard a long time ago, knowing that I would, you know, follow people. There are people that I love to death. I'm constantly finding new astrologers and new practitioners and new people whose perspectives I really love and I will follow forever. But I also know that for me, and I've talked about this before, I'm so detached from the idea of the followers, and I'm so detached from the idea of the social media, that I want to be known for somebody who's done really great work in the long term, because I've really helped change people's lives, or maybe I've,
the real flex,
you know, put out a video that really helped somebody through a difficult transit, or maybe I gave a lecture or wrote a book on something that really helped people. And it's interesting what you were saying about talking about like children, like younger people, you know, because I feel like, at least for me, because it had such a profound effect on me and it really changed my life, having a reading and understanding why I am the way I am. I hope and pray that there is a world in the future where maybe we start integrating astrology into, whether it's therapy or even
grade school.
Working with counselors. And I mean, imagine a world if somebody were to have looked at your chart 20 years ago and said to you, hey, Mike, you'd be really good at doing XYZ. You'd be really good at rapping. You'd be really good at being an astrologer. You'd be really good at research. You'd be really good at all these things, and it's going to make you really happy. So what can we do educationally and lifestyle-wise to kind of lay the foundation so we can really nurture those abilities and those traits? To
chills right now.
Right.
Because there's scientific evidence out there and research to denote that like there's an experiment that's been already done on this, where people have looked at just the midheaven and you can advise on the career. So this can already start to be taught to the kids, but there's all this disinformation by paid scientists to put out this lies that it's not worth it to pay for an astrologer, even though there's scientific experiments. And it's a disservice to our children, because we needed this as kids, you know, and to be taught this changes the game. That's really my mission.
Huge.
To kind of get
and in
this
such
there.
a big way when you think about it. Like, so you are a Taurus rising, and then you've got that Venus that's in the 12th house.
Yeah.
So of course you're going to do like that kind of work, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
You're going to do that kind of like
North Node in the 9th house in Aqua. I'm going to bring it to the schools. Like, I'm going to make sure.
I'm so for that.
Right.
I'm so for that.
Even if it's basic astrology you teach in kindergarten and get them, because like, oh my gosh, can you imagine if kindergartners, first graders, second graders could speak astrology?
I mean, I've been doing this the last couple of years. I mean, I'm almost 32, and I have a lot of really good close friends of mine that have been having kids, and from the time that, you know, their babies are born, I do their charts, or the time that they've got 2 or 3 year olds, I'll do their charts. And something I've been just doing for fun the last couple of years is talking to them about their charts and helping them understand their children. And I think that this is really important, because when you have this little being, and, you know, each individual chart is so different and unique from a siblings, that, you know, raising children in a household where it's like everybody has to eat the same way, study the same way, live the same way, play the same sports, participate in the same things, in the same way that we look at education, it's not really a one-size-fit-all thing. So we can raise happier, healthier, better educated, more aware children if we do have the opportunity to look at their charts when they're younger and really cater to those things that make them happy and what's actually going to make them grow. But also, secondly, really be aware when they're going through certain cycles, why they're acting the way that they're acting. Right. Like, imagine looking at a chart knowing that a kid is more predisposed to addiction, health problems. We're going to
predictably.
Right. And we're going to have happier kids because we don't have parents that are forcing them into situations where they're being told they have to go to an Ivy League school and become an attorney, when in reality they would make an excellent chef or a seamstress, or, you know, they should be an entrepreneur. And I think that maybe we'd have less depressed adults, lower suicide rates, less issues in terms of family and with relations with parents.
Oh yeah. And the best part is, I feel like Saturn in Aqua is, we've been working and active for a while. There's all this previous research that the Pluto Virgo generation did that's out there. It's suppressed, but it's there. Like, so there's enough research to prove astrology. But then we have our own experience. I have recorded consultations I can download. I have testimonials. Like, we can literally all pull our experience and create a new updated library of knowledge. And like, really, you know, that's really the next frontier, creating case studies to share and debunk, you know, a lot of misconceptions about astrology. Like, you know, who statistically really does cheat the most. And then, of course, go into how you can't look at it in the sun sign. But even if there's experiments that are failures, this is data we can pass on to the new generation. And really now, I think the most important astrology is teaching parents how to really recognize Saturn cycles in your child's development.
Well, especially those Saturn squares, right? Like 7, 14, you know, 21, 28, and those cycles that you go through, because it's so helpful as an adult to navigate that. But when you're a kid or when you're young and you don't understand Saturn, you just think it's this like strict parent or teacher or whatever. Right. It can be so helpful for a parent to be able to be like, okay, so they're going through, you know, Saturn through their third and they need more assistance in communicating, and maybe I need to be working with them as they're studying, and maybe, you know, they learn differently. And then we start really looking at like their natal placements, and if they do happen to have Mercury retrograde and they learn differently, and they're not going to get the same education just sitting in a classroom with 28 other kids, that's when we really start to look at things differently and realize that we can really cultivate happier beings. I don't know. It's like the older that I get, I'm like, the more that I'm like, yeah, it's about the kids.
Straight up.
I have the North Node in the 5th house too, so I'm like, you know, now that I'm like hitting like my 30s, I'm like, I need to start talking to 20-something-year-olds more. Or like, you know, I'm like constantly trying to see what younger people are doing, not because I'm trying to stay hip, but it's more like they are the future.
And that's another thing. Like, I'll always listen to a more experienced, like, anybody, but especially concerning this, I'm always open to beginners because they offer new perspective that helps you see things with their consciousness that you may not have thought of it. And I won't be like, oh, you don't know that much. Like, there's the teachers, the students, the teachers sometimes, so, or all the time. So.
Well, and it's also really interesting because I feel like I really have grown to like love, like I have clients that are 17 and I have clients that are like 75. So it's like, I've really grown to love like the younger generations, at least than myself.
Charts after 2005. Like, once I know you're born after that, or 95, I'm like, yes, this is
I like
awesome.
Like the people that've got like Pluto and Sag, and the people that have got like Pisces Saturn, or maybe even Aries Saturn.
Pisces, right? Yeah.
And I'm living
you're the
for
next
it.
generation. You're about to burn this world alive.
It's so interesting to see that and to see how they're evolving, and it makes me feel so good because I'm like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Like, all my Capricorn stellium was just here to like hold space and just like create that foundation for the change.
Right.
You know, and it makes me like super emotional knowing that, you know, maybe I'm working a super weird career and I have a very unusual job, but like day by day, I am helping change the world one person at a time. And if I can bring that information to one person who can benefit from that and then realize their soul's purpose, they're going to go and do that for other people. Maybe not through astrology, but through their actions.
And that's key. Maybe not through astrology. And that's one thing that really also helped me respect. Like, there's some people who have certain intimate wisdom that, you know, you can tell from a chart, and they didn't even need to know astrology to know that. And I just respect that so much. It's just like, okay, we all have our own forms of like knowledge and whatnot. And,
or they go through a transit where they have a Neptune transit or a Pluto transit or a Saturn transit, where they just have all of this life knowledge and information and these experiences that show up. Yeah. Right. And so it's like, you know, people would never know. It's like, I have politicians who come to me. I have judges, lawyers, I have doctors, I have psychologists. I mean, it's just, it's amazing to see the variety of the people I think that I service, and know that if my little bit of information can affect them and help change their perspective, what are they then doing for the people they're helping?
And that's what humbled me so much. Like, when I realized that this is actually helping people, and like people, because I was just putting my message out there. I didn't really think much of it. But then when people would come to me, be like, wow, like you spoke directly to me, or like you really changed my life and all that. This is when I started going away from more the predictions and like flair, and be like, wow, this is a real service. Like, I'm really, you know. But question, what's your go-to house system?
Okay, so I like Placidus because I'm a rebel. And I find that Placidus is the most accurate for me when it comes to prediction methods, because I definitely am like that psycho-astrologer that in a session I'm like looking day by day or hour by hour for the conjunctions and the transits. I do feel the effects of the whole house systems. Like, when something changes, I feel it. And it's weird for me because I'm 0 degrees cardinal on all 4 angles. So, even if my house cusps aren't always 0 degrees, I go with Placidus. I use Placidus for my clients as well.
0 degree risings. It makes it so much easier. It's like, oh yes, you're normal.
But the house cusps for me are not always 0. They're either
Placidus,
28 or 2 or 3.
Right.
But for the cardinal degrees, it's like, oh my God, my life changes every 4 months. I feel the change of the seasons intensely.
During the mutable sign going to cardinal, or yeah. Which is wild because once again, like the whole, I'm an equal signer, and I'll like blend it with whole signs. But I learned that that's more good for psychological profiles, because houses are supposed to be equal. But I reluctantly had to admit, Placidus is eerily on point with the transits. And
especially when you learn about the degree astrology and like the cusp degrees. And
so, question for you, because I hate interceptions. Like, I hate looking at a chart and there's like multiple houses. Like, fuck, that's what equal signs is for. But like,
do you have interceptions?
Thankfully, no.
I do.
I have a big ass 10th house, but like, I don't have any interceptors. So, do you have any experiences of noticing like accuracy in multiple cusps?
And I'll use my chart as an example. Like, even if I'm a 0 degree rising on the 4 cardinal points or the angular houses, technically my 9th house is Taurus, and technically my 2nd house is Scorpio. So for me, Gemini and Sag are intercepted. These are the signs that I don't understand. These are the signs that
so you don't have 9th house in Gemini.
No. And what's funny is that
and you never went to college.
Well, I did, yeah.
You did?
I did, yeah.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah, but for me, it was like me being like, I want to do this, and then I want to do that, and then I want to do this, and then I dropped out. So it was like I was supposed to be going down the path of like trying to, do the dentistry thing, and then I was just like, fuck it.
You had multiple changes too.
Yeah, so for me, it's weird because Mercury's conjunct my sun, and I have Gemini intercepted, and then I've got, Jupiter in the 10th house. So for me, so much of my lessons and learning has stemmed more from my self-education and more from the continuing courses that I do. And I feel like I've definitely done more educating since college than ever before. But I do believe in intercepted houses. For those of you guys who don't know what that is, it's when you use Placidus and a house gets swallowed up. So when a house gets like skipped, so it won't be on the cusp. So it's harder to work with that energy, and it's also harder to work with the ruling planet.
And it's due to the proximity to the equator, right? Like, it depends where you're at.
I know wholeheartedly, yeah, that's what it's based off of. But I know wholeheartedly that intercepted houses are definitely like a real thing. Like, it's for me. So
it is real. Okay.
Yeah, especially the last couple of years, I've seen a lot more Sag and Gemini energies move into my life to teach me more about that. But I believe also intercepted houses can be like these hidden treasures where once you learn to unlock it and work with it, it's like, especially if you have those planets in specific angular houses or in conjunctions or superior placements, they can be, once you realize it, it's like, aha, boom, everything opens. Yeah.
I'll give Placidus this. Placidus reminded me of the eerily frightening accuracy of progressed moon transits, because the progressed moon was on my Placidus 9th house, and I went back to college to the day. I was like, all right, Placidus, I'm gonna have to take you serious.
Don't sleep on those progressed transits. Those progressed transits are very accurate. Sometimes you'll see something going on in a client's life, and I'll look at the natal transit and I'm like, I don't see it. And then I'll look at the progressed transits and I'll be like, oh my God, this is real. And progress are nothing to be fucked with. I mean, right now, you're a Gemini. My progressed moon's in Gemini. It's in the 8th house.
Right.
And my progressed moon's coming up into the 9th house. And ironically, I am going back and doing another program.
Nice.
So it's kind of interesting because I feel like if you dig deep, and like astrology people are weird people, right? You've got people who are like kind of into it, and then you've got people who are like, they don't sleep. All they do is stay up all night.
Talking shit to Jupiter, like, what?
They stay up all night and they're like in astrology forums and they're reading stuff. And like once you've broken into that level of like astrological obsession, it's like then you start really figuring out
the matrix codes open up to you. But ideally, what you want to do is blend all the house systems. You can blend Placidus with whole and equal and use them all. But
it's about research. You have to compare them. Yeah. Like for me, when I do a session, I'm going to look at the transits to the natal. I'm going to look at the progressions. I'm going to look at the solar return. And I look for repetitive patterns and themes and things that are repeating before I'll even make a prediction, because you want to make sure it all lines up, you know?
And the best thing to do is to prove certain assumptions wrong, because that's where the magic happens, when you're like, it isn't wrong. Or if it is, you see out. But this is another awesome episode. Very, very grateful.
Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I love getting to talk about this stuff. I hope this one's well received and that you guys have a little bit of food for thought, especially when it comes to astrology and learning more about the philosophy of astrology, how you apply it, how you utilize it in your day-to-day life, and just more about, I guess, the practice of that in the houses. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, especially if you have questions or if you have any recommendations for new podcast themes or episodes that we could be creating. We want to hear what you guys want to know about.
Boom, let us know, and thank you for staying tuned. We're in the double digits once again. Candace and I are very pleased, the whole team here. So other than that, y'all stay blessed as always.
We'll see all of you guys super soon. Take care.